Bored Apes and
population
these
today.
NFT projects are going to be crypto relics at the end of the day. The question is, what does a Web3 relic mean from a worth standpoint 50 years from now?
Most of these people that are buying into this project, like, are they really thinking that long
No.
term?
No.
No, they're
No.
not.
If the US government ever found out who Satoshi is, he'd probably get arrested too, honestly.
The US regulatory authority is basically the de facto regulatory authority of the world. Could there be a case where the US government holds those validators responsible? And if they hold the validators responsible, how much compliance would we see across the board? 95%, 99%? That is a fatal flaw with Ethereum. We are matless. We are matless again, but everything will be back to normal next week.
Yeah, I think so. There'll always be bumps in the road when we do these types of things, but those of you who've listened to enough podcasts, watch enough content, you know that everything ebbs and flows. So Connor and I are traveling this weekend, and we're just we wanted to at least get an episode in, and felt like a good time to do a State of the Union for what's kind of happened this summer. I know we've talked about doing these State of the Union episodes every once in a while because we want to focus on the parallels of crypto and Christianity on this podcast, but sometimes the crypto degen in us that got us into this space wants to still talk about the markets and what that means from the overall impact of things. So yeah, this is going to be one of those episodes that we just kind of look at where the market is. And I'll just kind of start. We're sitting here today on August 26th, and Bitcoin this week has dropped back down to that 25K range. And I know, Connor, you're not really a trader. I'm just more of a dollar cost average investor in this stuff as well, for the at least Bitcoin and Ethereum. And if I see another, for me, if I want to be, no, this is like where I like kind of give sort of advice, but everybody take your own approach with a grain of salt. It's when the entire market's down where the biggest opportunities are to invest if you have some capital that you've been setting aside. There's a project that you want to be in because you've researched it and you want to be in it for the sake of just getting exposure to it, go for it. I don't know if that's always the best strategy. I would stick with Bitcoin and Ethereum, honestly. And then I would throw like maybe whatever you're capable of investing into maybe something a little more volatile or sporadic or risky, however you want to say it. But I wouldn't go dollar cost averaging into the altcoins necessarily unless it's a long-term strategy, and you have the capital to risk to do it. So that's at least my general consensus. I did dollar cost average in some altcoins for a bit, whatever I was allowed to dollar cost average into, and wasn't necessarily the best strategy, especially if you did Cardano, for example. So that's just some of the things that I've been looking at. And so I guess a lot of the things attributed to Bitcoin here, we obviously had the SpaceX news. There's a pretty substantial amount that got dumped. It's been recovering nicely, though, and we're kind of in the same place we were last summer, respectively, around this time. So I'm not too skittish about it. It's the whole economy collectively is a little bit, it's not the greatest right now, but we've seen economic indicators not even be the deciding factor with how Bitcoin ebbs and flows, but it's still a part of it regardless. So that's just my 30,000 foot pitch. And yeah, I don't know what you're thinking about, Connor, with that.
When you just said that we're in like the same place that we were last year, I feel like that's like the general sentiment, is just realizing that we really are in this for the long haul with this economic renewal, because for a little while there, people were saying, hey, maybe the bull market is back. Maybe inflation doesn't matter. Um, maybe the Fed actions don't matter. And it's like, no, actually, all these things do affect these markets, and we have to, get through it. So I just, that's just my general feeling browsing Twitter, is people are just kind of coming to that realization, and we're really hitting those bear market lows. So it's a good time to just look through Web3 and ask ourselves, what is the state of this place? What are the good projects? What are the things that actually matter? And I say good projects from like a, actual utility perspective. Like, what is it that really matters about what we're doing here in Web3? Because if it's all just, and this is other things I've just seen on Twitter and in message chat groups, but like if it's all just like pump and dumps and scams and, these giant companies going under and finding out they scammed you, is this really a space you want to be a part of or not? So it's necessary.
We are
It's
doing a
good to
little
kind of
bit
have these
better.
bear market actions.
We're doing a little bit better than last year, just kind of looking at where things were last year around this time. But it's still
We're
like
doing better, but I feel like
not.
what's
It
hit
feels
is
the
just
same.
like the whole past year is just coming, into play, and it's like people are realizing that, like, wow, like we actually have been through a lot, and there was a lot of not great forces, in play, in the previous
Yeah,
bull
there was a
run
lot of
with Celsius and
just
with
bad actors
FTX.
that were getting weeded out in crypto as a whole.
And I feel like what's the latest one was just like, who was that company that was a custodian, Bitcoin custodian for Swan Bitcoin for a little bit?
Oh
Was it?
shoot!
It wasn't Prism. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I look.
Because that was the latest one, and it was like, are we not over this yet? And it's like, no, we're not actually over this yet. There's another player to fall, and so the question on everybody's mind is like, are there more? You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all gonna depend on how much crypto has been invested and leveraged by assets that aren't real. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
That's been one of the
That's
more
exactly
interesting
what's
things, is
going on.
seeing like how much has been invested with stuff that isn't actually there.
Yeah. Talking about, like, why don't we just dive into the first thing we're talking about here with the NFT marketplace just coming down to, floor market lows. Um, I think that might be the first interesting thing to check out.
I'm gonna be dropping an NFT project called the Basement Boys. Just kidding. So it
Let's
literally
go.
though where this is interesting.
Do you? Mm-hmm.
What?
Yeah, I was actually gonna say, do you have the chart? Maybe just pull it up on screen just to show people what we're
Okay.
actually looking at.
Yeah, I want to see. I want to get a. I can't get the 90-day though for some reason, but I can pull it. I can pull it up here just to kind of look at on. And I know I'll
I
probably
could.
get. Honestly, actually, here, hold up. Let me find. This will be better if I get OpenSea up here. So what I find interesting is Bored Apes is all the rage, and it's still like one of the flagship NFT projects, but their floor dropped exponentially because people were remember, like, celebrities were paying millions for these projects just to have them as their Twitter profile picture, and now market sentiment. If you look at the fear to greed index, fear is definitely the the driver, and I'd be willing to wager a lot of these celebrities that were in some of these projects initially are no longer in them.
Just looking on Twitter, like, this is how I knew, because I just saw people dishing on all the Bored Apes holders.
Yeah.
All those people that Bored Apes was like telling, hey, like, we're never coming down, and you guys are wrong about our project, and blah 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 blah. Like, all those people are coming to the Twitter feed to to dunk on those previous takes, and it's like, okay, there's something going on here. And I mean, realistically, it's like, well, what's really going on? Not much that hasn't been going on for the past year. You know, prices are coming down. Things are just trading markets are coming down and hitting those bear markets. But it's just been a year of it, and it's getting to the point where people are done. You know, I don't want to share like private DMs, but I'm in a couple like Web3 chats, and a couple of them had Bored Apes holders in them that have sold since, you know, going through all this mess. And I do know that Bored Apes is hosting a big party down in Miami. And I guess they didn't get a lot of attendance for their like exclusive club
Oh wow.
signups, so they opened it up to general admission. And just in the chat, people were like, "Hey, you going to Miami?" And people were like, "Nope, nah, I'm good." So,
So it's not as
so I don't
cool
know.
as
I
it
kind of
once
feel
was
that the
then.
sentiment there is not great. It's just not great. People are angry, to be honest. I think that's what it is. Is people are angry and they're just done. So, but I mean, these when you talk about utility with NFTs, like there's no doubt there's a lot of like, you know, what the Bitcoin maxis might call scam elements for sure, because it's like, what are you really buying into? Well, you're buying into something that you hope the sentiment is going to be strong enough and it's going to be cool enough, you know, going forward that it's going to stay, you know, priced high or increase in value. You're buying into that, and then you're also buying into the status symbol. And when you lose both of those things, you know, what do you have? You have something that's worthless. And so trying to trade something that relies on like general populist sentiment is hard, is difficult. So
Yeah, it's
I would just
kind
be
of
careful
like
about
it's
that.
difficult to say that in this social arbitrage isn't something that's necessarily going to work in this economy from an investing standpoint. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And the other thing I just want to pull up here too is the actual CoinGecko chart for Bored Apes Club alone.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just looking at this chart over the past 90 days, it's just been nonstop down. I mean, this is only 90 days. This was May 30th, 2023, which which things started to kind of come down a little bit before then. But trading up at 45, and I mean, look at this chart. Like, it doesn't look good, does it?
No.
Um, and then we had kind of a dip from the general trend on Tuesday, and I think that's when things finally hit in. Um, but yeah, it's like people are like, "Where's this chart going?" It you know, there's no real sign that will coming back up anytime soon, and so that's what's getting people worried.
If if Bored
And then one
Apes
more
was,
thing I wanted to pull up.
yeah, just saying, like, if Bored Apes
Yeah,
was actually like a community that was about giving exclusive groups of people exclusive access to learn how to make more money or learn how, like, get like more high level information and access to things, I think that more people would be about it, but it doesn't really seem to do
yeah,
that, and it just seems to be like, kind of like Billy McFarland and what he did with like his black metal card or like the Firefest stuff. Like that's what it feels like more than an actual, um, net benefit to anybody. It's just another
yeah,
Firefest, right?
yeah. Hey, do you remember like what do they call them, like silly bands? They were
Yeah.
like these wrist things,
Yep.
like in the shapes of dinosaurs and
That would
just
have been a
rubber
big
wrists,
thing
and
when
you
you
yeah.
were when you were
I
growing
mean,
up.
that's what exactly, and like that's what these are. You know, they're fads. So, and it's tough to say because like some things do hold through. Like, you know, people want the
Yeah.
Nike Dunks still, and you know, could those have been a
No,
fad? Like, yeah, they were a popular shoe back then. They're a
board apes
popular
and
shoe
these
today.
NFT projects are going to be crypto relics at the end of the day. Um, the question is, what does a Web3 relic mean from a worth standpoint 50 years from now?
Oh yeah,
That's the question. Like,
yeah. But I feel like yeah, but that's a good thing because I do think that just historically, like a bored ape is going to mean something.
yeah,
You know, assuming the space hangs around in any form whatsoever.
Yeah.
But is it going to be worth this much? Who knows? And then also, most of these people that are buying into this project, like, are they really thinking that, that long
No.
term?
Nope.
No, they're
No.
not.
Nope.
So yeah, so I think you're gonna have a lot of sell pressure, but we'll see. One other thing I just wanted to pull up was this tweet here. This Niraj guy, he's the
Yeah.
head of Coin, or one of the heads of Coin Center. So he's a really cool guy. He's actually, and maybe we'll pivot into the Tornado Cash discussion. He's kind of at the forefront of that suit for the rights of Tornado Cash and developers in Web3. But he had to dunk because I guess this guy Andrew Miller was mad at his take back in November 2021 about Bored Apes, and so this guy responds about Niraj's comments, basically saying that he really can't imagine the ape staying valuable, and he wrote this big piece, about why he's wrong. And here we are sitting in 2023, August 2023, and he's right, or he was right. So this is just like what I've been seeing on the Twitter timeline. I don't know what you've been seeing, but Bored Apes have just taken a hit left and right.
My Twitter timeline usually consists of the on-chain activity. I like understanding what the whales are doing, and I follow a couple of accounts that call out projects. So kind of like, I don't want to say like pump projects, but like they kind of are analyzing the market more than I do, and they give like calls. Not that I'm investing in every one of their calls, but I've been on the floor for some of their stuff, which has been pretty awesome. And then yeah, I've just anything that like kind of gives me more learning capabilities, just what's out there and what's coming. I'm not sitting here with an unlimited bag to just throw a couple dollars here or there into every project. But I try to stay in tune with what's going on, because I am looking for the next what the next startup is for me to put something in. But right now, this podcast, from a crypto standpoint, is probably where I'm investing the most, just because of the personal attachment to it. So that's kind of my sentiment right now, is like, at least with this, like, I can invest in us as opposed to a project that I don't have control over.
Yeah. Talking about, I think that's a great thing to point out to people too, because I mean that's kind of what my, I guess, investment philosophy is, though, just in general. Like, if you're going to invest, if you're going to throw money into projects, you're relying on those people to basically perform, and you're just hoping that your money grows. Like, one of the best things you can do is just always invest in yourself, invest in, your own business, invest in, your own life, and then you're in control of that growth.
And education too. Education too. And I'm not talking about college. I'm talking about like the right books, the right tools, sometimes the right relationships even. So it's all a part of it. And those who do those kind of things know what we're talking about. It's not necessarily the easiest, but the people that do this stuff understand, and so that's the kicker.
Talking about
go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, like, talking about on-chain activity, because you said that's a popular thing on your Twitter feed. I don't know if you saw this. I saw this just yesterday, but apparently the DEA was sending some crypto to the U.S. Marshal Service, something they acquired probably during a big bust. And so they were sending coins that were scammed from people to the U.S. Marshal Service, and some other scammer actually intercepted that transaction. And the way he did it is he saw that the DEA was sending to the U.S. Marshal Service. They sent a test transaction, like when you send just a small bit to make sure that you don't lose all your coins. He saw that transaction, and then he created a spoof address that replicated the first 4 or 5 digits of the address and the last 4 or 5. Because I don't know about you, but that's what I always do. I just double check to make sure the first few numbers and the very last numbers match, and then I say it's probably good, right?
Yeah.
And then I send. So that's what he did. So his address, the in between, the sandwich didn't, but the ends did match. And I don't know exactly how he got them to send to that address, but they did. And he intercepted all those coins. So
Well,
it's
maybe
just
what was
crazy. Like,
happening,
you know,
the Marshal Service was supposed to send some back to confirm, or they just never confirmed.
yeah,
And so then they started sending it to that guy because the addresses looked so similar. They weren't checking it. And
yeah,
that's sometimes the demise of people is, you need to check your keys, or where you're sending stuff, because otherwise
it's just like we're in a nascent space and people are still figuring out how to operate in this space, and it's like
yeah.
even the US government can get scammed. So that's one thing to just recognize, that like, hey, we still, like, this is still the Wild West out here. So, you got to be very careful with what you're doing. More importantly than that, one thing that could have prevented this from happening is if they had a .eth address instead of this long, whatever you call it, hexacode address, because I know none of us review the send addresses every single time we're sending, because they're just so long. And, especially if you're doing a lot of transactions, you're just going to kind of make sure you send a little test, hope it's good, check the first or the last few digits. But if you had a .eth name that you were sending to, like I'm sending to Branden.eth and you can send to Connor.eth, like
Yeah.
that's going to protect you, because that's much easier to remember, and, lost less opportunity for mistakes.
People are going to see that activity either way because of the visibility of the chain, but yeah, that would prevent uh, a lot of that mix up
Yeah.
there, and it's less to remember too. Like, that's the thing. Like, sometimes just a simple layer of extra security can go a long way, and it seems like unnecessary initially, but didn't have to be a complex ENS domain name. Like, it could have been something pretty generic or simple, or even shoot, just make a little, like, make made up shell company name essentially. So yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Mastercard and Visa um, parted ways with Binance. I thought that was kind of interesting this week. Another
Okay.
it's similar to like Instagram with the NFTs. It's like, yep, we're done. It's until the next bull run, we're not interested.
Yeah, pretty much. So the two founders of Tornado Cash, the head developers, and of course, when you say founders in this space, you're like, well, yeah, they're the creators, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they control the project. Today, they just developed it. But the two figures that are known for Tornado Cash are Roman Storm and Roman Semenov. We call them the Roman brothers, but they're not actually brothers. They just share the same first name, different last names, though.
Sure.
So these yeah. So the two Romans got arrested. Just was it? It wasn't yesterday. I think it was the day before last. Well, we were recording this on Saturday. The podcast isn't going to go out for another few days, but they got arrested this week, basically, by the FBI, and they're not U.S. citizens. So the U.S. tracked them down. Maybe there was some sort of extradition, but whatever the case, they were arrested, and it's just another chapter in this ongoing saga of Tornado Cash, battling with the U.S. authorities for basically code that they created, and then maybe North Korea. This isn't even proven. The claim is that the Lazarus Group, which is a hacking group in North Korea, used Tornado to wash stolen funds in the crypto space. And that by creating this protocol and enabling it to exist and maintaining it through the DAO, that supposedly these people are responsible for basically aiding and abetting North Korea, which is a sanctioned entity. So once Tornado Cash got sanctioned, they've been going after these people. And this is probably the biggest step in the case, is that they actually arrested these two head developers, the Roman brothers. And now it's going to have to play out in the court. Like, are they responsible for this? And it really is just crazy thinking like the claim is not that they intentionally helped North Korea. The claim is that they, created a system that that North Korea was able to take advantage of, and that they are somehow responsible for that. So, just crazy.
Yeah, it's like we talked about how, like, with when I look back at our episode with was it Sam from Florida on the CBDC stuff?
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah,
how are we supposed to control what is being used for what? Like, the currency of illegal activity is $100 bills, and yet there seems to be no drive or ambition to, clamp down on that activity as aggressively as they're going after some of this stuff. It's crazy to me that there's more. Why would people do that type of activity on the blockchain when it's so traceable? And I know that Tornado Cash's goal was to help eliminate that trace, but couldn't you still see where stuff was coming from going into Tornado Cash, and then it got spit out with a different transaction address?
So the way the protocol works, you can see what's coming in for sure, but the problem is it's basically laundering it, right, with a bunch of other transactions. So you don't know which transaction that's coming out is connected to the transaction that's going in. Now, the one issue with that is that supposedly North Korea was washing, these large sums. We're talking like hundreds ETH, right? 100 ETH sum or something like that. And there's a lot less transactions going into that, right? So,
Sure.
Into that, that sum. So if they're putting all that in and then taking it all out at once, then obviously that transaction is connected.
There's going to be bad actors in all walks and practices of life, and to just kind of pinpoint it on software developers, essentially, or people who just wrote code, is kind of, it's just ridiculous. But when you think about it, with the effect that Bitcoin had on economies, if the U.S. government ever found out who Satoshi is, he'd probably get arrested too, honestly.
So what I wanted to do was just share this stuff from Chris Black, because I think it's so great. But particularly this tweet is what I wanted to point out. Is there is no way for the arrested Tornado Cash devs to stop Lazarus, the North Korean hacking group, from using Tornado smart contracts. There was nothing they could have done. The indictment from the prosecutors just claims that they committed a crime by not engaging in ineffective theatrics like KYC, AML on the front end, which this is the truth. Like, they could not have done anything. So they're getting arrested literally for just creating the code that was used by North Korea. So your point was, because Bitcoin maxis say, well, they should have done this, they should have done that, and they shouldn't have built an Ethereum. But if Satoshi was discovered, do you think that the U.S. government would arrest him? I think there's a very strong case for that, right? If he wasn't anonymous.
Yeah.
So it just gives you something to think about. You're like, yeah, this is really just persecution of privacy, and this is a persecution of, self-sovereignty. And I would even just encourage like the Bitcoin maxis to recognize that and how important this Tornado Cash case is, because you should not be criminalized for writing code that could possibly be used by bad actors, but isn't designed to be used by bad actors. It's designed for privacy, and privacy should be a human right.
Yeah, like the reason why Vitalik doesn't get arrested for Ethereum is because I feel like he's done a good job of posturing himself from a societal
Yeah.
standpoint, like kind of almost making him like an altruistic Einstein like figure so that he doesn't or well who else is an example of this like one of he's put himself in position where he is like one of those untouchable geniuses essentially, which is why and but even him like he doesn't necessarily own most of his own projects. He's just the front man for it.
Yeah, I think there's an argument to be made about how willingly Ethereum in general has gone along with regulations and basically protecting themselves from the regime by conceding on certain grounds.
They kissed the ring enough.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I'm not I'm not too sure. Like, yeah, Vitalik has avoided jail for that, but I'm not really sure that is the best case. Just thinking back, like to Tornado Cash when the sanctions first hit, and there was a graph for a long time that would show the Ethereum validators who were basically censoring transactions, right? And
Huh.
I remember reaching like 85, maybe even 90% of Ethereum validators were refusing to validate blocks with Tornado Cash transactions. And it's like, okay, it didn't really matter because there was still those 15% of validators who will. But if that inched all the way up to 100, then you just effectively had censorship on blockchain, which is crazy to think about. But you know, it's just the way the Ethereum protocol is built. So yeah, I mean that is something to be concerned about, and I do see the arguments against Ethereum for that.
That is something to think about. It's like if you're in a project that's kind of opened up the ERC20 channels, if you're not a part of that, the Ethereum groupthink, your project might be in trouble.
Yeah, and this is what Chris Black actually brought up. So this is one more thing I wanted to. Actually, this is a different tweet. I just realized, but I like this tweet too. When he wait, this is the wrong tweet. I'm sorry.
You're all good.
It was this tweet. It was this one. So for the Bitcoiners, no matter how much you hate Ethereum, which I even acknowledge that there's problems there, right? It's critical that every Bitcoiner understands this fact. Tornado Cash on Ethereum is far more decentralized than any privacy tool on Bitcoin that currently exists. If Tornado loses this case, then privacy on Bitcoin is very screwed, he says. And this is true. Like, no matter how much you hate Ethereum, like what Tornado Cash is doing on Ethereum is a moral good, like enabling privacy on chain, because that's something you don't really have on Bitcoin. And yeah, you have
Yeah.
CoinJoin, but if you really understand the technology behind how these things work, you realize that like this case, what happens to Tornado Cash is going to affect all of those privacy features, and none of them is as good as Tornado Cash is. So, um, don't get into your Bitcoin maxi head and think that this doesn't matter, because it does.
Yep. And still, like, cash is still the most decentralized vehicle for transacting in the economy as it sits today. You see the war on cash now going in certain gas stations. They won't even accept bills over 20 anymore. And that's just wild to me.
Yeah.
Um, it's interesting seeing those limitations getting put on the economy. If I have $100 bill, I won't be able to spend it because you don't want to verify that it's real. Or you don't want to trust that
Yeah.
what I'm spending is actually legit. it's it's just hysterical to me that this
Yeah.
is what it's come to essentially.
It's sad, but it's the reality of it.
Yeah. Well,
But and here's something else to think about with Tornado Cash is just So the people writing the code, we already know they couldn't have stopped. They couldn't have stopped North Korea from using it because they wrote it and now it exists on the Ethereum chain. And anybody who wants to interact with those smart contracts can, because the code can't be changed at this point. But you know who could is the validators. The validators didn't have to approve those transactions, right? And we already saw that validators, because validators can choose which transactions they want to approve, which blocks they want to approve. And as they did with Tornado Cash. So those validators, could there be a case where the US government holds those validators responsible? And if they hold the validators responsible, how much compliance would we see across the board? Would we see 95%, 99%, maybe all validators comply with the US government to avoid regulations and sanctions? We could see that, you know? So that is a fatal flaw with Ethereum.
Yeah, and I was about to say though, how many of the validators aren't actually liable to the U.S. government because they're not in the United States?
I know, but it doesn't matter. Like the Roman brothers aren't United States citizens, yet the FBI is still going to arrest them. Like the U.S. regulatory authority is basically the de facto regulatory authority of the world. We make the policy, and the world complies, and we extradite people.
They got deemed as a terrorist organization, a foreign terrorist organization. That's how the U.S. got involved. And whenever a foreign or domestic terrorist organization is out there, the U.S. government will find a way to take care of it, and that's just how they are. And yeah, it's not right, but that's what it is. And sometimes, and honestly, from where we sit, we know enough to see there's something a little murky here, but we don't know what's going on to the fullest extent. If there is any, backroom handshake deals under the table that we're not privy to. I mean, shoot, like just knowing what happens in some of these European countries like Spain or Ukraine, it's crazy. So yeah, it's all those things that can get considered. So that's just some of the stuff that I think about from time to time that nobody else talks about. Like Vladimir Putin has. It's not like Vladimir Putin owns real estate in Spain. Why is he allowed to own real estate in Spain? Why is he allowed to do black market transactions in Spain? Obviously, he probably hasn't been there since the Ukraine stuff, but before that, those are all things that get factored in, and I don't think it always gets realized to the fullest extent.
Yeah, well, I mean, and I just got in a debate with somebody on Twitter the other day, but I don't think people just realize how much. Yeah, I mean, Russia, these other countries, China, obviously have swing power, but it's nowhere near what the United States has. And this Bitcoin maxi I was in a debate with, talking about how, like, this type of thing where if like the U.S. government were to make mining Bitcoin illegal or something, like that wouldn't matter. Like, Bitcoin is stronger than all that. He's like, and his example was he pointed to China, and he's like, China at one point, banned Bitcoin mining, and look, we're fine. Like that's a giant authoritarian state, and it's like, okay, yes, but the China is not the U.S., right?
Yeah.
If the U.S. decides something is, a vehicle of terrorism or whatever, that has much, like, undeniably stronger sway than China deciding that its citizens can't mine Bitcoin. So, and people just don't realize that. And this case is a perfect example. The U.S. government sanctioned Tornado Cash, and then like the next day they arrested Alexei in the Netherlands. It's like, what does the Netherlands have to do with the U.S.? It doesn't matter because the U.S. has the swing power, and now we've arrested, these two head developers, the two Roman brothers, and not U.S. citizens once again. So that wouldn't happen if China decided that Tornado Cash was sanctioned.
Yeah, it's It's interesting times we live in. Um, I do anticipate an election year being beneficial for the market collectively. I think that their economy will grow in an election year next year. I don't know what that looks like. I've seen some pretty interesting things going on from a economy standpoint where I sit, where I work, and so it's just it's been interesting, but there's still things happening, and I think that that's what we need to kind of rest assured in. And ultimately, I think the best advice for people is to just work a job, save money best you can, and invest where it makes sense, and don't try to overextend yourself and find yourself in a pickle. So and yeah, it's
Yeah.
like I said, this was a fun little conversation on a Saturday morning, and hope that everybody
Yep.
continues to like, comment, review, subscribe wherever podcasts are found, and especially on the YouTube channel because that's where the biggest growth comes from. We're really close to 100 subscribers, so um, let's begin that push, that campaign. Then we'll be on the push for 500 and then 1,000 subscribers. So I think we're capable of that, and hope that everybody who's been watching us enjoys this stuff. And that I guess that those kind of my closing thoughts. I don't know, Connor, if you have any more closing thoughts, but yeah.
No. Yeah, great conversation. Just looking at the state of Web3 here this episode, and next episode we have Matt back. We'll be back to a normal podcast, and looking to talk to more guests. But great episode.
Awesome. All right, everybody, have a great week. Peace.